Hello. I'm going to talk about two films that I caught via streaming in the last 2 days while they're fresh in the noggin. One is called Skinamarink, and I saw it on Shudder. And I have to thank channel patron Shelly Druckrye for giving me access to Shudder. So, Skinamarink I had read a few blurbs about, and every couple of months it seems like there's a genre film that has this like immediate buzz attached to it. Barbarian comes to mind, Pearl. Uh, I mean, I'm forgetting a whole bunch that I probably could talk about, but um, this is the latest. The buzz isn't quite as obnoxious as some of those movies, I gotta say. Barbarian, by the time I'd heard about it, ad nauseum, I didn't really have much interest in seeing it. It didn't seem like something that I would respond to, and unless its cinematic attributes were transcended the premise and concept and its execution. So I still haven't seen Barbarian. But anyway, I started Pearl. I'm watching Pearl in installments. It's on the installment plan because so far it hasn't hooked me, but it has some things I like. I like the general look of it. When I'm finished, I'll try to do a full review. I did like Eggs, and I reviewed it on this channel. I didn't love Eggs, but if you want to know how I feel, check that review out, please. So this film I saw on Shudder, Skinamarink. Yeah, I'd read a few blurbs about it, didn't know much about it. Again, it's kind of like a hype thing where you're talking about, oh my God, it's done so differently and it's so intense and not much like it out there. And I heard all these things about Barbarian and a little bit about this one. So let me just talk about the movie plot as it is. It's a thin plot. Talk about the cinematic aspects of it and put it in the context of the growing. I'm not going to call it hype because it's not obnoxious or anything yet. The growing buzz around it because distributors and studios and people with money and also overzealous fan bro clickbait website writers, like Bloody Disgusting and a lot of horror ones. Some of them are good, some of them, they'll grab onto these things, and I know they're trying to, foster and keep the horror community going. I'm not part of the horror community. I have been sort of on its edges many times. I'm kind of a solo practitioner, a lone practitioner. Like people who practice magic are eclectic, solitary practitioner. So Skinamarink, yeah, I didn't have any idea what what it was going in. So essentially, yeah, I described kind of the feel of it, like the look, and that's very appealing to me. I thought that was extremely well done. It really sucked me into that. It's supposed to take place in 1995. I could kind of see that 1985 with the technology and the wear and tear on the film, or faux wear and tear on the film. I think 1985 would have been a lot better at the height of the video horror thing. Um, But anyway, sorry, I got a strange notification just now. So anyway, it's basically about these two kids, Kevin and Kaylee. I couldn't quite tell which one was supposed to be the older or younger. And they live in a house. And they have parents. So at some point, the dad leaves. This film is shot kind of from a bird's eye view. So it's like you're looking up, like you're a little miniature cameraman. It's like some Twilight Zone thing, and this giant house with this fascinating lighting that keeps shifting. Very David Lynch influenced. Very similar to his later work, like Inland Empire, where the lighting is kind of segueing in and out, and Lynch has kind of digitally graded like every frame precisely. So I think these guys, they're not nearly on that level, but this guy, but I think he was taking a page from that, and he did it well. And again, like I said, this could have been shot on video for all I know, and made to look filmish. But so it's just like an evening with the family, and it's like you never see the characters, just like Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. You never see any adults in Charlie Brown. You see their feet, occasionally their hands, and you hear that wah, wah. And, so this is shot in a way where you never really, with one or two shots, there are exceptions, you never really see what the characters look like from, like, say, about here up. There are parents, there's a dad, he's talking, he's making some kind of strange commentary on the phone that kind of sounds a little conspiratorial, or about his son Kevin. Maybe not conspiratorial, but I don't know if Kevin has a health problem and this guy doesn't want Kevin to know about it. Could be far more sinister. You don't really hear about the mother. So time goes by, and basically all you're doing is seeing this house explored with these beautiful different colors. Most of the lights in the house apparently don't work, so it's very dark. And the next morning, really, yeah, most of the lights in the house don't work. I will say, before the girl goes to sleep, someone comes in and she thinks it's her dad, walks out, and then another guy walks out. And again, you don't see their faces. You see them from like up here. And I'm like, are people breaking in, or what are people doing here? What's going on? And then these magical things start to happen. These nonsense things, like the toilet disappears, reappears, and disappears. The front door disappears, reappears, and disappears. So basically, there are no windows to the outside. When they pull the shutter, it's a wall. I gotta say, these kids handled this pretty calmly for most of the film. It didn't seem like it blew their mind or anything. Again, these are young kids, like 4 and 5, 6, I guess. Well, I think Kevin's 4, they say. I don't know how much older Kaylee is. So, they wake up and they decide, they figure out that the dad's not home, and they don't know why. They don't know why the mom's not home. And they kind of wander through the house. I mean, it is darkened, but their wanderings seem as though they're not really familiar with their own house. But I think it could be the changes to the house are unnerving them, so they don't know where they are. They're not located in space and time in their minds. Uh, I'm just speculating. They don't really give the information in the film to decide that, but that's maybe one read. Um, the kids don't talk very often. They don't talk amongst themselves. They kind of go through this day of wandering around the house, still wondering if maybe their dad's there, wondering if the sounds mean someone else is in the house. Until finally, the girl happens upon her mother, and that's a kind of a frightening scene. It's yeah, it's messed up, and you know, you have this kind of, she comes over to the bed, and there's somebody in the bed. You know, their head's moving, covered with covers, and they say, "Look under the bed." And then she's like, "There's nothing under the bed." And when she looks up, on the other side of the bed, back turned to us, with long hair and a nightgown, is the mother. You never see the mother's face. Well, let me correct that. You really, you know, at that point, you don't see the mother's face. And one of the things that was really creepy was the sound. There's no music at all. Okay, I think that was a big plus. The other thing is, when the parents talk, especially the mother, it is very unnerving. It's like, Kaylee, Kaylee. You know, but I'm doing a little more scary sounding, but it was a little more matter of fact. I don't know if I can imitate it, but Kaylee. And then when the characters, and they put subtitles, and the characters would whisper, the the letters would get smaller. And, but then there would be strange voices. They would say strange voice. I had the closed captions on the whole time. And some of them, they become increasingly strange and kind of demonic sounding. I just think that the dad was supposed to be the guy in the bed telling her to look under the bed, and there's nothing there. And the fear is the mother, and they're talking to each other, but the mother won't ever turn her back, and she's kind of making a lot of oblique references, kind of hinting, I guess, that she's maybe going away, never coming back. They've kind of hinted that they don't really, mom and dad don't do many things together. Mom's a shut-in, probably has a severe psychological issue. This is all kind of, you know, very roundabout. Could all, everything I'm saying could be bullshit, but I don't think so. On other things, probably, but not on this. So, because I kept rewinding parts of this and studying it. Once we get past that mother thing, there's a lot of walking and traveling throughout the house. Uh, Sometimes they can turn on the lights, sometimes they can't. There's never a fully lit room or hallway, and the play of the lights against the ceiling and the walls, again, very Lynchian, Inland Empire. Very, which also makes me think this might be shot on video, because Inland Empire was shot on low def video, and then he completely digitally color corrected and edited and sweetened every frame digitally himself. He may have had some assistance. But I'm out here talking about the brilliance of Inland Empire. That would be a long subject. But I do think there's at least a subliminal Lynch influence in this film, which is refreshing, you know, and it's not milked for just for weird's sake. It's very concentrated on the story. It's not a found footage film, and yet, in a way, it has that vibe, in the sense that you're locked in one place, kind of like a siege movie, also, and you're just seeing things kind of from the POV of the children, and never really seeing much of them. And the angles are askew. Uh, I will say it's a slow movie in some ways. Like Lynch, it will settle in a shot that's very interesting, color and lighting wise, of the house, like a wall or something in a shadow. Maybe you're trying to uh, you're trying to discern what's in the shadow. You start to think, you're seeing things you're not. So that's where I think it starts to succeed as a horror film. And but it'll hold on that 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds. So yeah, I mean, and then it'll slowly move. I love the camera work. I love the way the house looks. I love the lighting and the color. I love the texture of the film. So, what about the story? Well, Kevin takes a while to seem really concerned about what's going on. And one thing is, the big trope in the movie is that they turn on these videotapes they've made of old cartoons. I guess they're in the public domain. I don't know. Stuff I used to see as a kid, but it's stuff from the 30s and 40s mainly, really old stuff, and not associated with a marketable character like a Woody Woodpecker or Bugs Bunny or whatever, who began in that era. It's like the so that's the closest to a soundtrack you have. So you have that as kind of the banality of things while this other stuff is going on, this creepy stuff. And obviously it's a comfort for the children. It's kind of, in a way, it's a tether for the audience. Because what if you were caught in this position? TV might be your only outlet, your only source of communication. And back in 1995, again, I think this should have done 85, but it's quibbling. It's like a Night of the Living Dead. They're locked in the cabin, and like, there's a television, there's a radio, and you've kept us down here. And but they're such small kids that they don't really have these kind of survival concerns. I think it's just more like a natural need for comfort, and the comfort they've come to know and love is cartoons. So television, which becomes a comfort for children almost from birth. It's like Harlan Ellison's famous essay about the glass teat, and so I don't know. Eventually, you get to the point where the dad seems to return, and again, he talks in these very strange, clipped, hushed tones, and Kevin reacts. Sometimes he'll be quiet for a bit, and then he'll say yes, and he starts to get confused, and he tells Kevin to go through the house, and then he tells Kevin to get out some scissors, I think, and stick one in his eye. Apparently the kid does it because you can hear the kid screaming. And then the kid, somehow the phone begins to work. The phone had been not working. It was a simple thing. Somebody had left the other line off in a room they didn't know about. And of course that, made it so none of the phones could receive calls. This is the old school phones, right? Okay. And if you kept it off the hook, then nobody in the house could receive calls. So he finds it, puts it on the hook, and he calls 911, and he's not extremely coherent, but he explains that he is in pain, he's injured, he's been bleeding a little, doesn't know what's going on. That just kind of trails off into nowhere. The guy keeps asking him to stay on the line. Again, I don't know if they can trace the address with the technology back then. I can't really remember what the technology back then was. But it just kind of peters out. I don't know. I don't know what it's about. I mean, I do. I mean, like, I know what happens, more or less. The best you can discern from the kind of fractured and oblique way it's shot, where you're not getting, where the director is terribly controlling exactly what visual information you're allowed to get, um, and how much audio information you're allowed to get. But there are real moments where those two elements come together and create certain frissons that are very genuinely creepy. I can't say this was a scary movie, but not too many movies are scary to me anymore. They're disturbing, yes. Creepy, yes. This had some creepy and a little scary for me. It wasn't sustained. It meandered a bit, but I couldn't stop watching. I wanted to know what the fuck happened. That alone is a success to me, and to a lot of people, considered a success in a film and in filmmaking, storytelling. When you basically you want to know what happens next, you can't stop watching. It can be true of books and comics and other things too, music. So I stuck with it, and I'll probably watch it again, but I could get more out of it, or I could get kind of frustrated or bored with parts of it. But I will say the movie starts off with just kind of interesting setup of this situation, a little unclear about certain things. Then kind of it settles into a groove where it's a little frustrating because you're not quite sure what's going on. Then it settles into a brief period where it's kind of silly and comedic, not comedic, but kind of silly, but it's really just because the kids are silly, it's again, it's from their point of view. The silly just doesn't last but minutes, and then it becomes genuinely creepy and occasionally disturbing. So, but I don't like to use the word disturbing too much because, you're thinking of, some creature comes out and stabs Kevin's eyeball and rips it out on the camera. That's disturbing, or someone, captures the little girl and starts psychologically torturing her and screaming at her. So I don't mean that. As disturbing maybe is too harsh, descriptive. It's not really disturbing, but it is. I don't know. Maybe it's scary. Anyway, check it out. I still have a sore throat. Tell me what you think. Next movie, Satan's Children, 1975. I'm going to cheat and give you some info on Satan's Children. The movie. Directed by Joe Wiezycki. Written by Gary Garrett and Ron Levitt. Produced by Joe Wiezycki. All kinds of credits, people I'm not familiar with. Produced by Florida International Pictures. Oh boy. And released on March 15th, 1975. An 87-minute United States film. And it says it was given a sneak preview release in La Salle, Illinois on March 15, 1975, and later released to drive-in theaters to Fort Worth, Texas, August 22nd, 1975. Now, for a long time, this was released by Something Weird as a double feature DVD with Asylum of Satan. But now, in 2022, Something Weird, along with AFGA, American Genre Film Archive, which those two have been doing awesome work together, released a Blu-ray of the film. I almost want to say it's something that I might want in my library one day. It's really one of those movies where, okay, it's one of those movies where anything can happen, and pretty much does. There's no political correctness, so don't even think about that. Anything bad can happen to the main character happens. It's not his day, man. he's not as weak or however long the movie takes place over. And the other thing is this when you present the characters' uh, ideologies, they fulfill every stereotype of that kind of character that you would think they would. But they do subvert a few things, and they bring in some ideas that I can't say were outside of my anything I'd ever thought about. But they bring them home in an interesting fashion, and it's very much of its time. Very low budget. A lot of the blocking is bad, like for the actors. Little too naturalistic and doesn't really capture action very well. There's one frame where the main character toward the end is driving, and there's a character in the back seat, and he's driving and talking to her, and you see just this part of his head and this, and it's like 3 minutes. They're like, what a terrible angle, and why are they lingering on that? And ain't no Jean-Luc Godard kind of shit either. So Bobby is this kid, and I don't know what age, 15, 16, whatever, 17. Bobby is this kid, and his father is a lunatic. He's got hyperdrive OCD, constantly is beating him, putting him down, correcting him. He freaks out over the absolute slightest, infraction in the home environment. Then Bobby has a stepsister. I forgot her name. Janice, spelled Janis, like Joplin. And she's kind of a bitch. She flirts relentlessly with Bobby, but it's kind of that's why I thought at first. And I even came to the point where I thought, well, they're stepsister and brother, even though they have the same last name. So I don't know if he adopted one of them. But by blood, yeah, they're not related. So she kind of keeps amping up that tension of that idea or promise. And a couple of times I thought Bobby was just going to be like, okay, let's fuck, let's. And one time he does call her out, and she kind of makes fun of him. So I'm like, okay, I guess I was wrong. I thought she really did want to sleep with him. I think she really just wanted to torment him. And so he has a rough time. He gets in a big fight with his dad, and of course the sister is no help. Basically, he's had some marijuana in his room, and he denied it, and his sister narked on him. Sister whatever narked on him, and he lied to his dad. And at one time, he's yelling at his dad about it. He goes over to get something out of the refrigerator, and the dad, you think the dad, and then the dad gets mad, and you think it's going to be because, hold on, I want to know about this pot you have. But instead, he's like, you didn't shut that door to the refrigerator right, and it's like, the guy's a lunatic. So he basically tells him to fuck off, and he kind of wanders the city. Finally arrives in this bar, and this old man starts talking to him, much older man. You can't tell if the guy's hitting on him or not. It's a little ambiguous. He's not really saying anything out of line or anything. But, Bobby's a handsome young lad, and so one of the themes of the movie is he's going to be regarded, as a chicken hawk. And, or the chicken hawk's the one who prey on him, maybe I should say. And, of course, ironically, this big burly biker guy comes up. That should have been a red flag right there. And it's like, go away, old man. Hey, man, that old man's flirting with you. He's a pervert queer. So then he's like, "Hey man, come to my house, have some beer and weed." Well, when they get to the house, and he's right at the point where he's dropping the weed and the booze on Bobby, and Bobby seems to like the guy and have a heart platonically, and be having a good time. This guy calls up some of his friends and says they're gonna have a party, and before that happens, this cat rapes Bobby. I was wondering why he was taking like all his clothes off just to like hang out and have some beer. And then it gets worse because all the guys come over, all the guys come over, and they're all like rough, mean guys. I mean, they're not like biker. He's like a biker, but his buddies aren't really like bikers. Like they're not like muscular, but they are kind of like rednecks, sleazy. They don't act flamboyant or really act gay, so to speak, which I thought that was cool. I actually thought that was a good touch, a good change for movies of that era, and maybe a realistic touch if you think about people who were in rough trade and S&M, homosexual stuff back then. See my review on Cruising. Some of them did have very effeminate deliveries, but a lot of them didn't. They were like macho men. And so, they take him on a ride. He's totally naked. A lot of totally naked people in this movie. Or are mostly naked. Bobby's the totally naked one usually. And they basically pass him around as they're driving. They pass him around through the back seat in the front, basically, pushing his face into their cock, and one guy seems to be sodomizing him. It's really disturbing and horrible. I mean, but it's just, and of course, if it were filmed, with more gravitas and professionalism, it might be really genuinely disturbing. Like if Abel Ferrara had done it, in his early days, it might be like, oh my God. But, so I can't say it's funny or any of that, but it's ridiculous, but in a way it's kind of realistic. I don't know. So I kept thinking, what does this have to do with Satan? So let me tell you, my friends. So Bobby is all fucked up. And so they leave his body. I could leave him for dead. And he's been sodomized a lot. He's been beaten up, but he's been sodomized a lot. So they don't come out and give all of the anatomical details of the state of his rectum. But, I mean, at one point a character says, "Your ass is sore. Admit it." And yeah, so he has a hard time walking because of that. And I thought that was also realistic. It seems like it probably would be like that. Well, the people who find him are these hippies, and it turns out they are a satanic cult. And there is a fetching lass by the name of Sherry, played by Kathleen Mary Archer. Bobby Douglas, by the way, was Stephen White. I don't know. I don't know any of these actors, but that's okay. Sherry's like temporarily leading the coven while Simon, the mysterious, powerful Simon, is away somewhere on a mission. So this other sleazy cat, I'm trying to remember his name too. I can't remember it. Let's find out. Bear with me one second, please. I think it's Jay. No, Jake was the biker. It might have been Joshua. So I think it's Joshua. So Joshua was kind of like a narc on Sherry. He was basically like, "Don't keep this kid around. Simon won't like it. And this is where we get into this another level of this sexuality thing. Apparently, this group of Satanists are extreme homophobes. And they said, he's queer. Simon won't want him here. He's a gay boy. And then, Sherry's like, yeah, it's obvious he's been raped, and he just told me he did. Well, Simon still won't want him here. Simon doesn't want victims. He wants winners. So here you start getting into this kind of Levitt philosophy, kind of a takeoff on, you've got to be strong, and the weak can be discarded or destroyed. They have no place there. And, Levitt himself kind of vacillated back and forth after the Satanic Bible as to how he felt about Satanists, and what level of compassion you had for victims and people and animals that were harmed or exploited. Because as time went on, Levitt seemed to be speaking out quite a lot against rape and against animal abuse and child trafficking and things. In the Satanic Bible, they don't really address those things specifically, but you kind of get the impression that, hey, if it makes them feel good and they can get away with it, what the hell. So this movie's 1975. I don't know if I do think whoever wrote it had read Levitt. I mean, this is a kind of a Levitt structure. They do claim to have contact with Satan. They call him the master, and a few other epithets like Lucifer, but there's never any proof there's anything supernatural. This dude Joshua prays. I mean, he's really uptight. He's like praying to Satan that Simon's going to come back soon and fuck up Sherry and get rid of this queer kid. Again, this isn't really the actions of any Satanist that I've ever met, that are the Church of Satan Satanists. In this kind of situation, I can't imagine the Satanists that I've known or read about are familiar with treating this kid this way, and being such cocksuckers. Plus, they don't actually believe in Satan as a real anthropomorphic being. But this cult apparently, yes, they're devil worshippers, in addition to be capital S Satanists, Levitt Satanists. So Simon appears. He's got a mustache, and he's very sinister. He's got black hair, and a suit. Very of his time, and he tries to speak very erudite. Sometimes the actor doesn't pull it off. But he's fine. He's serviceable. But yeah, he's not happy about this scenario, and he feels as though, because what happened is Sherry, well, she falls in love with young Bobby, and she decides that Joshua is causing trouble by praying to the old master to bring in Simon. So she basically has the cult. Joshua has two women who are his accomplices. They hang them to death. They said there were 15 people in the cult, so bit by bit it starts to whittle away as the movie goes on. And Simon's kind of pissed. And he thinks that Sherry's lying, and he thinks that the boy is a queer. He wasn't really raped. And Sherry is buried alive up to her neck, and then they release and they put honey on her and stuff, on her face and her hair, and around her in a circle. And then they release these red ants. So the torture never stops. Then a series of implausible and yet predictable events take place. Bobby manages to crawl out of bed wearing only his white underwear, which that's how he's attired for the next 10 minutes of the film. And he is really fucked up. I mean, he's trying his best. He has a lot of good luck, though. He's our hero, right? So he doesn't immediately go out and try to physically free Sherry. But he tries to get away from the compound, altogether. And Simon sends people, and they're like, "Get him." And these guys, there's two sets of redneck, bumbling, burly, thugs. First two foolishly run into an electrified fence. The moment it's electrified, right after Bobby's jumped over it, just in the nick of time. The other two guys find Bobby and start to beat him up, and they're going to take him. One falls into quicksand. The other guy who's going off to do something is being screamed at by the quicksand victim. He's like, "Help! Help!" He's like begging he's begging Bobby, and Bobby's like barely conscious because he's been beaten up yet again. And so the other dude comes, and he's like, "Come on, hold on to my belt, man." And the guy's like freaking. He's like, "Help me!" It's like, I mean, in a way, it's just like bad exploitation film acting. But on another level, it's like these supposed badasses who have Satan behind them are just like these pitiful wimps, Not that I would maybe not be screaming in quicksand, but I don't present myself, as a machete wielding, satanic killer. Not very often, anyway. So, and then Bobby knocks the other guy who's trying to rescue him into it, and they both go in the quicksand, and Bobby gets away. Bobby gets a vehicle. Woo! Okay. So, I don't know how long Sherry's there with the ants, but Bobby goes back to his house, basically tells his dad to go fuck himself. His dad starts to attack him. He smashes a bottle of alcohol over his dad's head. Dad's either unconscious or dead. The mean sister Janice is still picking on him, making fun of him. He's like, "I'm sick of you. You just sit there now." And he like gets a gun, a rifle, and a knife, and he ties up Janice, and he puts her in his car, and he drives off, and he's dressed in decent clothes now. But you see, he's going on a revenge hunt. So this is a rape revenge movie. I mean, I know it's the man's being raped, but I don't care. And I know it's got other elements into it of exploitation. It's got everything, you can think of that's, fucked up, just about taboos and stereotypes, cliches, and of course, very, very movie that would be very quickly canceled in today's climate. So naturally, Lisa turns out and puts out a brand new spanking Blu-ray in 2022 of it. You go, Lisa. And so yeah, he finds all four of the guys who raped him, and he blows them all away with the rifle. And a little bit of it's in slow motion, so it kind of reminded me of Thriller: A Cruel Picture, where she blows away the rapist's thugs. That's in super, super slow motion. Very stylized. See my Thriller review for that. But it's very gratifying. And then, he's just like, "Fuck this. I'm tired of being this pussy. I'm going to, because that's how they regard him as just this, worthless, weakling victim." And I mean, really, it was hard for him not to be. He couldn't fight these people. He didn't know what the fuck was going on. He was too trusting, and he was trying to get away from a shitty home life. So in any case, he gets back to. There's some scenes where he's, shadows where he's obviously kind of dismembering some of the four gay guys who raped him, and then he goes to Simon, and Simon's like, basically, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I got something for you." And it's a bag. And basically, it's a bag full of all four heads. Not the rapists. He says, "Joshua was wrong." And wrong about him as in he was raped, and wrong about him as he's not a victim anymore. And so Simon, I'm pretty sure he allows him to free Sherry. Now, this isn't all just Simon being, magnanimous. Bobby's barter present, a barter, and that is Janice, his oversexed stepsister or whatever. And, they make occasional human sacrifices. So, they have quite a time with Janice, and she's ended up crucified. Crucified to death. Meanwhile, sappy music is Bobby and Sherry making beautiful love at last, and super romantic. I don't know, man. I liked this movie. I was with Bobby, man, and I even liked Sherry. I thought for what it was and the level it was on, the characters that mattered were at least likable, and the unlikable characters, well, they got theirs, and there definitely was some action and suspense, though a lot of it very poorly shot and framed. And I identify with the underdog sometimes. I used to be one for sure. And it was horrible what they did to this kid. He was not a bad kid, man. So now he's kind of like he's like a powerful member of the Church of Satan. But that's his thing. The way he can survive is to be violent. The main redeeming quality is that what he has with Sherry seems to be real. She's not like phony. That's another thing I liked about her character. She was mean to the coven while Simon was away, but she was always kind to Bobby and sweet. So there's there's a lot of little nice peculiarities to this one. So eccentricities. So I gotta say, I kind of dig Satan's Children. It hits a lot of great notes as an exploitation movie, and also just not just Satanism, because there were a lot of satanic horror movies of that period, but the whole gay thing, the whole homosexual angle. And there's another aspect, a little subplot, where there's a woman who's hit in the cult who's been hitting on Sherry. And Sherry's like warning her to get the fuck out of her face, But anyway, that plays out later. But so I thought that was pretty bold. I mean, not many movies of this nature with this kind of combination of elements that I know of were around in this period. I mean, maybe some. Surely this had to be a standout. Now, I imagine there were a few films along these lines that were triple X, because again, there were a lot of themes of themes of Satanism and bi-curious activities, and films that had both. I'm thinking of The Devil Inside Her with Annette Haven. That's a pretty cool one like that. But anyway, I'm gonna go, and I'm back on the old, computer, and I love you guys, and I'll be back again soon.